Welcome to the first ever episode of SnapEd LGU Mentor in Your Pocket. I'm Jennifer McCaffrey, the director of SnapEd at the University of Illinois and one of the co-hosts for this podcast. We are excited that you have joined us and hope that you find this podcast a valuable resource. On today's episode, as it is our first, we want to provide an overview of SNAP education program at land-grant universities, which we call LGU for short. We also want to cover who this podcast is trying to reach and what the goals and future plans are for the podcast. So joining us today is someone who can provide all of this and more regarding the work of the LGU SNAP education programs. So Dr. Sweeney, who serves as the LGU SNAP Education Program Assistant. So Lauren, we're so glad to have you here as the special guest for our first episode. And so to begin our conversation, can you explain what role you play as the program assistant?
Hi, good afternoon. So glad to be here. So I serve as a resource for land grants across the country who are conducting SNAP-Ed programming. And so really I help coordinate the efforts of land grant SNAP-Ed programs, the land grant SNAP-Ed program development team specifically, which I will tell you a little bit more about later on in the podcast, I believe. So I really help to serve as the liaison for state, regional, and national partners, both within the land grant system and externally. And so this is a broad overview of my job. As I mentioned, we'll talk about it a little bit more, and I'll get a little bit more into the weeds later on in the podcast.
Great. So we talk about the land grant system all the time. So for those who are new to the land grant or maybe never even knew, how many land grant universities are there? And how many of the LGUs receive SNAP-Ed funding?
Yeah, so when we talk about land grants, we typically talk about them based on the year that they were founded. And so we have three different types of land grant universities. We have our 1862s, our 1890s, and then our 1994 land grant universities. And so our 1862s were established to support agriculture and mechanical arts. And there are 57 of these institutions, so one in each state, as well as the District of Columbia and our U.S. territories. Our 1890 institutions, often also referred to as our historically Black colleges and universities, or our HBCUs, are found in the southern states, and we have 19 of those. And then finally, our 1994 institutions are Native American and tribal colleges and universities. And those are found mostly in the Midwest, the West and Midwest. And we have 35 tribal colleges and universities. And so in total, we have 111 colleges and universities, both with the land grant status, one of those three types of land grant statuses. And SNAP-Ed is currently offered of those at about half, so at 58 land grant universities in 47 states in the District of Columbia and in Guam is where SNAP-Ed is found currently at a land grant university. So needless to say, we have a pretty vast network of universities across the country with diverse backgrounds and skill sets that can and really are called upon often to support one another in their SNAP-Ed efforts.
I think I learned something new. I didn't know there was that many land grant universities. I think I had, the number in the close to 100, but not 111, and definitely more than I thought delivering SNAP education. So when we think about the LGUs, can you describe the impact that the LGU SNAP-Ed programs are having on improving access to food and better health for the population targeted by the program?
Yeah, absolutely. So our land grant SNAP-Ed programs are doing a lot of great work throughout the country. So as a whole, they're reaching millions of Americans with low income each year, from young children all the way to older adults. And how they reach them can really vary pretty greatly from program to program. But they're doing this by providing nutrition education in the communities, and working to make the communities in which our individuals are living a healthier place. And so they can do this by enhancing the environment in which people live, such as starting community gardens, enacting or changing policies or systems to help increase access to healthy foods, or even physical activity as well. And so lastly, our land grants also may be implementing large-scale social marketing campaigns that are used to target our consumers in places that they frequent, such as on buses or in grocery stores, or even maybe on online platforms as well. And so the PDT, or the Program Development Team, publishes a national report every 3 to 4 years that highlights the work of all of the land-grant universities as a system. And it includes success stories from our participants. It talks about reach, talks about the impacts that we're making on behavior changes. And so we're coming up on another report year. So the last year that we have a report from was 2019. So we will be updating that here soon. But the full report with all of our stats and things can be found on a website that we have for key stakeholders. And we also have an infographic as well that's associated with these impacts. And so that website, which we'll reference now, and then we'll also share a little bit later, but that website is snap-ed.extension.org.
We got to pause. I gotta let somebody in. Nathan was not supposed to lock the door. I'm recording. Okay, we're gonna have to edit that part out.
There was enough of a pause. We just need to let another pause so that I can,
yeah, put it back together. Yeah. Well, and I hope it doesn't come through because the doorbell was going.
I didn't hear anything.
She was knocking, so
I couldn't hear anything.
Oh, that's good. That's why I was wearing the headset. So you'll have to see on the recording if it goes. I have this doorbell that plays the Nutcracker song. So. Okay. All right. So we'll do a pause here so we can piece that back together. So we talked about the LGU, and across the LGU, there's a lot of different acronyms. And I think at the beginning of the show, we talked about PDT. So can you describe a little bit more detail of what is the PDT?
Yeah, so the PDT, or the Program Development Team, is a group of individuals that are really here to support the SNAP-Ed work of land-grant universities throughout the country. So it was established in 2002. So we're going on about 20 years that the PDT has been around. And it is a sounding board, a work group that is focused on strengthening the SNAP-Ed program throughout the land-grant system. And so more specifically, the SNAP-Ed is the Program Development Team is a group of volunteers. They volunteer for 3 to 4 years. They are from land grants throughout the country, and we really do they come from different universities in each of the 4 National Institute or Food and Agriculture, or NIFA, regions. So we have individuals from the Northeast, the North Central, the South, and the West. And they're really here to help foster communication and understanding of SNAP-Ed programming among our federal, state, and university partners, to provide leadership and professional development to our staff, to help with program planning, management, reporting, evaluation. So really to help universities communicate with one another, but also to implement their own programs. And so we have individuals from both 1862 and 1890, or the HBCUs. So we really do have a good, diverse skill sets on our team that helps provide some unique experiences, backgrounds. They have different varying responsibilities. So they really do help to provide a good, diverse focus or understanding of the work that we're doing as well.
Yes, so in full disclosure and a little commercial, I am a PDT member and going on my fourth year. So this will probably be my last year. And it really has been a good experience. So for those of you that are looking to get involved, or want to be a member of a PDT, we do put a call out for applications every year, and so you can apply, or if you're ever just curious about it, you could contact Lauren and she'll let you know about how to become a PDT member. But from myself and others that I've known, it really is a good opportunity to get to know the network across the land grant. And so if you're curious about that, I encourage you to apply to become a member. So looking at the SNAP-Ed in the LGU program, how can somebody engage with the work that is happening in the PDT?
Yeah, well, I would say the best way is the regional calls. So as I mentioned earlier, we have those 4 NIFA regions, and each of those regions has a regional call either monthly or every other month. And those calls are typically spearheaded by a PDT member who provides updates from the PDT, but could also be a good mentor or somebody for individuals to reach out to if they want to better connect with the PDT. And so this is where they can find out about projects that the PDT is working on, or ask for help or help connecting with other universities. And so, but also periodically, the PDT may have some ad hoc committees to help work on special projects. As I mentioned earlier, we're getting ready to work on our national report again. And so we will be creating an ad hoc committee. So if that's something that you're interested in doing, we'll put out a call for individuals to help with kind of spearheading and the direction of that report. You're always willing or you're always able to reach out to me, and I'm happy to connect you with the PDT or answer any questions that you may have. And then Jennifer, as you mentioned, we will be having applications soon for the next year. So at the end of every calendar year, we send out information on how you can become a part of the program development team. So we would love to have individuals who are interested in applying for that. So stay tuned.
Excellent. So we mentioned at the beginning of the episode that this is a new podcast and this is the first episode. So tell us, who is this new podcast for?
Yeah, so hopefully this new podcast will be for everyone. That is our hope as the program development team putting out these podcasts. One of our main ideas behind this is that it would be something that can be shared with all individuals. So some of the podcast topics may be more directed at brand new staff or faculty, and then some may be for those that are a little bit more seasoned, that have a better understanding, but it's a new topic or something new that's coming that's being implemented within SNAP-Ed. So we really do hope that the podcast, that some of the topics will really speak to everyone across the land grant system.
Yeah, and I just love the title of the podcast, the LGU Mentor in the Pocket, because sometimes you just need to phone a friend. And so this is like you're phoning a friend through the podcast, because we all know we're so busy. And sometimes you're just need to listen to the podcast in the car or as you're out taking a walk. So I really love the title, and I hope that the listeners come to enjoy it too and find it as very useful. So when you look to the future, what goals and plans do you have for the podcast?
Yeah, so, as we're looking towards the future, the goals and the plans that we have, we know we need to be flexible, and this is the first time we've done this, and so we're going to see how it goes. But as of right now, we're really hoping that, as I mentioned earlier, that these podcasts really speak to all experience levels, and is something that can be helpful to all land grants, regardless of size of institution, size of funding, that sort of thing, or years of service. And so right now our plan is to release a 15 to 20-minute episode twice a month. And so we'll have guest speakers from various universities across the country, and for each of these podcasts, and plan to cover a variety of topics. So far, some of the topics that we have in the works were something on the Farm Bill, the grant cycle, surviving an audit, working with your state agency, really the list goes on and on. So there's so many great topics that we can do podcasts on that we think would be helpful, that we've heard from you all of some topics that would be helpful. So there's a lot that we have in the works, but our desire is to put it out every 2 weeks or so.
That sounds fantastic. So as a coordinator, what if I have a suggestion for a topic or a speaker? Can I make that suggestion?
Yes, please do. So these are really going to be as helpful to you. We want them to be helpful to you. So by having you suggest topics, we want to hear from you all on potential speakers, whether you want to be a speaker or you know somebody who would be a great speaker. We really want to hear that from you all. So you can suggest it by reaching out to me. My email is lauren.sweeney, SWEENEY @sdstate.edu. You can suggest topics during your regional meetings. We have a contact page on our SnapEd website that you can visit. Again, that is snapedresources.extension.org. So any way that you can get in touch with myself, any other members on the PDT, we are happy to hear from you about potential topics and potential speakers.
Well, I look forward to everybody flooding your inbox with suggestions for topics and for speakers, because we would love to have them on the show. And Lauren, thank you so much for your time today. We hope all the listeners and all of you out there are as excited as we are about the new resource. And we hope that the SnapEd LGU Mentor in Your Pocket will help your work with SNAP education at the LGUs across the country and its territories. Please listen bi-weekly for new episodes, and you can find the podcast on Spotify and on the eExtension SnapEd Resource Center at snap.edresources.extension.org. Upcoming episodes will focus more on SnapEd in the LGU system. You can find all the resources discussed today at snap-ed.extension.org and snap-ed.resources.extension.org. Thanks for all of you who listened. The views, information, or opinions expressed during this podcast are solely those of the individuals involved, are not a legal or expert interpretation by, an endorsement of, and do not necessarily represent those of South Dakota State University, the South Dakota Board of Regents, eExtension, a SnapEd state agency, the Food and Nutrition Service, National Institute of Food and Agriculture, or the United States Department of Agriculture and their employees and agents. The SnapEd Land Grant University Program Development Team, SDSU, and the above named parties, employees, and agents are not responsible for and do not verify for accuracy any of the information contained in the podcast series available for listening. The primary purpose of this podcast series is to educate and inform. This podcast series does not constitute professional advice or services. The developers of SnapEd LGU Mentor in Your Pocket and the above named parties assume no liability for any activities in connection with this podcast or for use of this podcast in connection with any other website, computer, playing device, or use of any information contained in the podcast. This podcast is available for private, non-commercial use only. You may not copy, edit, modify, or redistribute. This podcast is intellectual property of South Dakota State University and cannot be used without permission. To inquire about permissions for using this content, reach out to LGU PDT at lgusnaped@gmail.com.